Yesterday we were dealing with what I'm calling the talking points in Nietzsche. So I'll get those notes back out. First talking point, death of God. See, in some ways, James is a good counterpoint to Nietzsche because they both fundamentally see life the same way. They're both atheists, you know. They're both working strictly at a phenomenal level. They're both literary characters. But James is still trying to find hope. He's committed to diversity, the particulars. There's no unifying truth upstairs, as you know, as Nietzsche, both James and Nietzsche. But James is trying to say, but life is good. Nietzsche's saying all the same things, but saying life isn't so good. You know, and that's why James and Nietzsche have a different sort of feel, even though in some ways their actual beliefs aren't that dissimilar. All right, next was nihilism. Nihilism. And at this point, I was giving you what Nietzsche identifies as the causes, and you should have two of those in your notes, and I got the third one yesterday. See? It's easy. And number 3 was simply the prevailing notion of Darwin's idea of evolution, but it wasn't the evolution so much that fascinated Nietzsche. He wasn't so sure that the notion of progress is a meaningful one at all. But it was more the idea that under Darwin's hypothesis, man is an accident of nature. Man is an accident of nature. There's no purpose, no rhyme, no reason, no ultimate direction, no conclusion. We just happen to be here. Drop a little fizz or a little soda in water, it fizzes. And then it goes away. And that's you, Josiah. You're a little fizz, a beaker of water, and you're going to be gone. That's the end of it. That's what fascinated Nietzsche. That when it's all said and done, we're just simply here as a kind of unexpected quirk. And that's part of the nothingness of our existence. So he is a nihilist because the death of God is inseparably related to these causes of nihilism that we've talked about. The decadence of the church, you know, the Darwinian approach and so on. That brings us to the third talking point in Nietzsche, which is a famous phrase in the transvaluation of values. Transvaluation of values. Nietzsche is saying that because of nihilism, because of the death of God, because of the things we've talked about, we need to renegotiate our values. We have had traditionally values rooted in a notion of God. Why should I be courageous? Because God will reward it. Why should I be trustworthy and honest in my dealings? Because God sees me, and I will ultimately account for my life before Him. And my whole ethical foundation is rooted on some idea that there's God out there. You know, and God's watching. And that does affect your values. That affects your ethics. You know, Nicole? God's watching you. Even if nobody else is watching you. Then you believe you better behave yourself. Right? Isn't that the effect God has on us? Some people have said character is what you do when nobody's watching you except God. Right? True character, But what if there's no God watching you? What if when no one's watching you, no one is really watching you? What if you really can't get away with it? What if all of those values that are rooted in some idea of God are fictitious imaginations of your mind? Well, then what do? Well, Nietzsche says you need to renegotiate, or as he calls it, transvalue your values. And so it's a little famous phrase. And so he needs a new foundation. We don't have God, we don't have eternity, we don't have life after death, we don't have heaven and hell, we don't have all of those traditional sort of the bulwarks of our ethical theories. Kant said we need to have those. Remember that? Kant says, even though I don't know for sure God is there, I need to believe it, I need to take it by faith, I need to assume it so that I can make sense out of life. Nietzsche says, we know that God, we can't prove that God is there, therefore there is no God, so how do I create value in my life? How do I do that? And so I need a new foundation, a new principle, some new root. And what is it? Ben, what is it? Our resident Nietzschean? Nietzsche expert. But where does he find?
The Superman.
The Superman, and what's at the heart? That is the effect. What's the cause? The transvaluation of values will produce the Superman, but what does the Superman himself substitute for belief in God in order to be the Superman? What is the root of his ethic? That's kind of low energy today, aren't you? What is this? This is the week you're in, is that? Please, Sarah.
The will to power.
Thank you. The will to power. What do I put in the place of God? I put this fundamental reality of my own human psychology, namely that I am possessed of a will to power. And where did he get that? Where did Nietzsche get this whole notion of the centrality of will? Where did that come from? What prior philosopher had really kicked that up onto the center stage of philosophical musings? The man's name is... a little blank. Jordan? Oh, come on, you guys. Come on. Who made will the centerpiece of his philosophy? Before Nietzsche, it was... Hobbes. Is that what you said? Hobbes? Kant. Oh, that's about... Oh, dear. Go ahead. Sydney, it is, of course. Schopenhauer. Okay, everybody, let's wake up. Smell the coffee. Here we are. It's philosophy. Schopenhauer. Does Schopenhauer call it the will to power? Is that what he calls it? What does he call it? Stephen? He calls it the will. Well, that's part of it. No? Anybody? For Schopenhauer, it's the... Who did Schopenhauer? Megan. Megan's not here. So, you're going to have to go off your recollection. It's not the will to power, it's the will to... Jordan, redeem yourself?
Desire?
Well, it is, that's part of it, but that's not what the phrase. The will to survive. Okay. That's the will that carries us along. We're the leaf in the river, and the thing that drags us along is this passion we have to keep being drug along, to keep surviving. We have a desire to exist as opposed to not exist, and that, in a sense, is a noose around our necks. It keeps us, floating along this river. And Nietzsche liked the notion of will. He was all about will, but he didn't like the notion of will to survive. He didn't think that quite accurately describes the greatest human beings in history. You know. When you take a look at the great human beings that we esteem the highest, the Napoleons, Genghis Khan, you know, Marco Polo, Jesus of Nazareth, Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great. He would include all of those names on the list of history's greats. And he would say, in every case, you're not seeing fundamentally the will to survive at work. These guys put themselves at incredible risk. Jesus doesn't run away from Jerusalem, he goes to Jerusalem, knowing what's awaiting him there is not a Sunday school picnic, you know. He looks at Julius Caesar, he looks at all of the greats of human history, and sees that the thing that really drives them is not just a will to survive, but a will to power, a will to glory. How do you explain a race car driver? Is he out there hoping to survive? Is that what he puts himself behind the wheel of a car, goes 220 miles an hour? Is that what he's got on his mind? You know? Nietzsche says there's something else going on in the human makeup. And in the place of God, in the place where we used to find God or the gods, we now need to face the music of what is basic to our human impulses, is this will to glory, this will to power. And so we need to not apologize for it. We shouldn't be saying, oh, that's bad, we need to get that under control. He says the true Ubermensch is the person who embraces that and makes it the centerpiece of his whole life. And that brings him then to this next point, and really this next point. Transvaluation is the will to power, and that's my next talking point, the will to power. Jordan.
Would you say that Hitler would be an Ubermensch?
Well, Nietzsche would not. Hitler liked Nietzsche, and Nietzsche would like Hitler so much.
Okay.
The reason, did I say that right?
Yeah.
Hitler liked Nietzsche. Nietzsche would not have liked Hitler had he been, because Nietzsche did not have in his thought any notion of kind of a race superiority. And even the anti-Semitism, it shows up a little bit in Nietzsche's writings, more in his sister's revision of his writings. I think the argument can be made that Nietzsche is a radical individualist and Hitler was a radical collectivist. So you got some similarity, but they're not the same.
So does Nietzsche believe that you can, in the will to power, that you can do whatever it takes to get that power? If you have, Napoleon could do whatever he wanted in order to attain that power that he had, or that he was trying to get?
In principle, yes. I'm not quite sure where your question is leading.
Would he say that, killing, standing in his way, could kill civilians in order to attain that power?
Yeah. You could certainly interpret his writings in that direction. I don't think you would say that Nietzsche is sort of advocating gratuitous violence, go out and bash people over the head so you can get ahead. He's more just advocating a life of individual courage and risk and adventure. And if you happen to step on a few toes in the process, that's just the way it goes. So it's a little bit of a different emphasis.
One last question. Did he believe that there could be two of these people of power at the same time?
Yeah.
And what if they were to
Then they just duke it out. Go at it. They go out, stand in the middle of the street in Dodge City, and draw. He likes the duel. He likes the idea of dueling someone for personal honor. He likes Alexander Hamilton dueling. Who?
Aaron Burr.
Aaron Burr, right. Go ahead.
Is there anything for him that would keep a person from embracing this will to power? Because if everyone has this will to power, then kind of with what his question, who wins, but are there people that don't embrace it? And so it's only the good ones that actually embrace it.
He believed, good question. I think Nietzsche's answer is that there are, by nature of the case, relatively few who have the courage to embrace it. Most people are weak, and that leads most people to embrace the herd morality, by which we try to domesticate the champions among us and make them weak with us. I don't think he ever quite talks about what the world would look like if all of us, all of a sudden with gusto embrace the will to power. That's a very interesting world we create for ourselves. And I don't think Nietzsche, with Nietzsche, you need to appreciate he's not an artistic philosopher. It's not like he's painting, okay, here's how to be. Here's how life should look in some sort of nice, great, wonderfully organized vision. That's what Kant tries to do. That's what Hegel tries to do, not Nietzsche. Nietzsche is this genius, but don't try to make this the universal ethic for the human race. It's going to be really tough to get that to work. It's a great ethic for the individual. But as soon as I try to make this as soon as I try to make this an ethic for the group, I get Nazism. It's just the way it works. So he calls for, this will to power is what he calls the origins of the master morality. Not the slave morality of the herd, the master morality in which I become a law unto myself. And I create my own meaning. There's no meaning outside of me. The universe tells me I'm meaningless. Indeed, I am meaningless. I'm an accident of nature. I will exist for a moment and then disappear eternally. But in this brief span that I have in which I exist, I need to generate my own meaning existentially. So he's a father of existentialism. I don't find my meaning somewhere in a great essence. I find it in my existence. That's where I need to locate my whole purpose. He condemned Christian ethics as the ethics of a worm, the ethics of weakness, and he said it's the ethics of women. So, sorry, girls, I didn't say it. That's Nietzsche's view. Christianity, not Christ. And there's an odd kind of sense in which Nietzsche likes Jesus and saw him as one of the great examples of the very philosophy he was advocating, but he hated Christianity. He hated what the church had done to Christ. He believes Jesus is a great Nietzschean, But the church has become the greatest proponent of the herd morality we've ever seen. So it's the church that gives us this ethic of weakness, this ethic of women who just want to be compassionate and everybody let's just be nice to each other. Okay, children, play nice. Nietzsche says no, play rough, play hard, play viciously, be powerful. Nobody ever said to Julius Caesar, okay, now be nice. Oh, right. That's not the way Julius Caesar became great. Somebody says to Alexander the Great, okay, no, I'm not going to play nice at all. I'm going to play rough. I'm going to play hard. I'm going to take over the world. You see, and that's what Nietzsche says is the way it operates. This is the ethics of true manliness. And it's this that produces what's commonly called the Superman. I don't like that too much because, of course, the American comic hero is Superman. I grew up on Superman. And Superman stands for truth, justice, and the American way. And Nietzsche's not big on any of those. So we call this the Ubermensch literally the Uberman. And the greatest single work in which Nietzsche really portrays in detail the character of the Ubermensch is a book by the title of, Alicia?
Was it Thus Spoke Zarathustra?
It is. Yes.
One of his other books, Not Good and Beautiful, it would seem more like he talked about
Thus Spoke Zarathustra is usually regarded as the best example of it, but it shows up in everything he wrote. It is all over the place, and certainly in that one it pops up as well. And I think everything he wrote has it kind of hiding behind the scenes. But this is the book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. This is the book that Hitler sent to all his, in the late 20s, when he was still not on anybody's radar. And he just had this little coterie of Nazis who were associating themselves with him and his kind of off-the-wall ideas. He sent Thus Spoke, a signed copy, love, Adolf Hitler, to all of these guys, Hermann Goring, all of these characters that eventually became his henchmen. Copies of it, and wanted them to read it, digest it, get it into their bloodstream. This is the picture of German greatness that he had in mind.
Was the term Ubermensch something that Nietzsche came up with?
Apparently, yeah. I don't think that was around before Nietzsche. Yes.
Does it actually mean the Superman? Is that the literal title?
It means overman. Uber is Ubermensch is man, so literally it's overman.
Okay.
But in English that doesn't have a nice ring to it. And somebody thought one day Superman has a little bit more of the sense of the word that we're after. So the Superman is the guy who, in a sense for Nietzsche, overcomes his humanity. He overcomes his fears. And by so doing, he gives rise to authentic humanity. And he lives in a state of what Nietzsche famously calls dialectical courage. This is the courage of the person who, in spite of the odds, in spite of the risks, puts himself in the position of ultimate peril just for the sake of the adventure of it. Looks at a world that is meaningless, nonsensical, pointless, purposeless, and cries a great yes! And there are so many great literary characters who are just a wonderful expression of Nietzsche's Superman. There's many. Ernest Hemingway, in most of his books, has a Nietzschean Ubermensch. And many say that Hemingway himself was thoroughly Nietzschean in his personal philosophy. But he always incorporates it. And it's become one of the most dominant figures of 20th century cultural sort of celebration, the Nietzschean Ubermensch. And I would like to discuss with you some of the particular qualities of the Ubermensch, but unfortunately, once again, the clock has robbed me of the opportunity. So we'll wrap up with Nietzsche tomorrow and take a look at some examples of this. Till then, my friends, adieu.